I hope you enjoyed my recreation of Roy Benson's billiard ball routine. Incidentally, the music was written by Roy Benson. All that music was written by Roy Benson, and the words that you heard actually came from Roy's mouth, except I lip-synced on top of his audio track. I want you to know, of course, that this routine first appears in print in a book that I wrote with Todd Carr in 2006 called Roy Benson by Starlight. There's a lot more additional information than you're going to see in this lecture about Roy Benson and his magic in this book. I mean, it's an 800-page book, so and like it's got a zillion step-by-step photographs. So anyway, I recommend the book, but in any case, this is a video about billiard ball manipulation. So in a moment, we're going to start and show you the equipment required for Roy Benson's routine. And now let us begin by showing you the equipment required to perform Roy Benson's billiard ball routine. Now, the first thing you need is a trick table. Now, I built this table for the book Roy Benson by Starlight. So you don't get confused, this little container in the back, this little metal container, is designed to hold a stack of silver dollars inside, underneath the edge of the table. And I use this for my video DVD set, The Ultimate Guide to the Miser's Dream. But that's not, we don't concern ourselves with that. We want to concern ourselves with what is on the front of the table here. And you see there is a little sliding panel, just a little piece of masonite that slides open, and there's a groove cut inside the table so that you can put a cigarette inside. And this is a cigarette, goes in there just like that. And it's got a sliding door. So now the door just stays shut, it's not locked in. It's just that gravity just holds that door there. When you grab the edge of the table, you would slide your fingers forward, and that would open the door and let the cigarette drop out into your fingers. So basically, it's just a little sliding door like this. When your fingers come in, you push the door this way, and it opens, or the groove opens up, and you can just drop cigarette into the hand. So here it is. I'm going to set this up. It goes inside the edge of the table like this. Now, resting onto the back end of the table is a little box that sits in the back like this. I actually cut a hole in the bottom of the box to hold the silver dollar thing, but that's neither here nor there. And this sits on the back of the table. Now, inside the table, what I've put is a little paper clip, so I can put a little piece of flash paper, which is just taped in there, and that just holds a piece of flash paper in there. So that's just a little paper clip that's been used with gaffer's tape. It's held on the inside, a little piece of flash paper, and this whole unit sits there like this. So there's a cigarette hidden on the edge, and here's a table like that. Now, you also need some billiard balls. So let's start with little bag. I made this bag myself out of a piece of leather, but Roy Benson, I think, had a container that was for, I think, a shaving kit he found, and he was using that. You have 2 billiard balls in a shell. Two 2¼ inch billiard balls go inside a shell like this, and they sit inside the bag like that. Now, as to the orientation, by the way, of how which ball should have the shell, where it sits, I don't think it really matters as much as finding a position and keeping it that way. I'm not sure exactly how Benson did it. I always just keep it this way. The ball on this side with me is always the one with the shell. The shell's cupped on the bottom. This is closed with a snap. Now, there's a little bit of extra leather here. And what you do is you take a dummy cigarette. Now, let me explain what a dummy cigarette is. A dummy cigarette is a piece of, it's a fake cigarette. In this case, in this routine, you have 2 dummy cigarettes. The first dummy cigarette is just a dowel. Roy Benson did a beautiful job on his. He actually painted it so it looks like a burnt cigarette. And you place that right by the flap of the cigarette, so that when your hand goes into the case, and it goes into the case away from audience's view, you can pick this up, and when you transfer it to your hand, the dummy cigarette drops into your hand. So this sits in the case. So let me show you the box again. This little dummy cigarette with the 2 billiard balls in a shell fits inside the case in this angle like that. So it's just like that, and that fits inside on top of the table. So you got a cigarette in the front, a real unlit cigarette in the front, a dummy cigarette sitting with the billiard balls in the box in the back there. Now, you have a few other things required for this routine. Cigarette lighter, Zippo lighter, which Roy Benson kept in his jacket pocket. And then we also have another dummy cigarette. Well, let me explain this first. A billiard ball. Remember, those balls are 2 1/4 inch. These billiard balls, I'll explain later, are actually 2 1/8. They're Cardini size, slightly smaller. One white billiard ball is placed into the trouser pocket on this side. On the left trouser pocket, you have 2 billiard balls. You have a 2 1/8 red, 2 1/8 white. So these balls are slightly smaller than the ones that are in the leather case, and they fit in the trouser pocket on the left side. The thing is, you have to know which ball is where. So when you put it in the pocket, you need to palm the red ball out of the pocket. So this goes inside here in this order. If it was a very deep pocket, smaller, you would have it this way, so you can grab the red one first. But in this case, I have a pretty wide pocket, so I place the white ball in this side and this one next to it, like that. Now, here's an important little note here. Roy Benson had a dummy cigarette in his pocket, and in the films that I've seen of Roy Benson doing this, he had trouble. The only one flaw in this routine was when he got into his pocket, I noticed he had a little bit of trouble making sure that he got a hold of the cigarette, the dummy cigarette, and the ball. I saw that as a technical flaw in the routine. Now, when we were writing the book Roy Benson by Starlight, Todd Carr had access to Roy Benson's props, which are in David Copperfield's, the studio warehouse in Las Vegas. And when Todd went there, I said, Todd, please photograph everything that you can find at the studio. Make sure, and any Roy Benson prop. I was not able to go. Todd took great photographs of everything. And I noticed a little technical detail on Roy Benson's cigarettes. Now, a dummy cigarette was just this, but on this cigarette here, there's a little hook eye. The little thing, a little wood screw with a little round circle on it, a hook eye. And I wondered, why would Roy Benson put a little hook eye on a little dummy cigarette like that? But then I remembered in Roy Benson's notes, and you can see, by the way, these notes in the Benson book, Roy Benson by Starlight. I found out that one of Roy Benson's favorite things in the world was to take a bobby pin, a hairpin hairpin, bobby pin, and a safety pin, and put a safety pin to the bobby pin like this. And he thought this was the greatest thing in the world. He would use this in all sorts of manners for close-up tricks. He would, if he needed to have a ball and a shell coin together in one piece in the pocket, he would put it inside the safety. Inside the bobby pin, and the safety pin would be in the pocket. And I reasoned that the reason for this hook eye, what made sense to me was that I think that at some point after the 1950s, Roy Benson put the dummy cigarette on this little pin, and then pinned this pin on the upper side of his right trouser pocket, so that when you needed to get that white ball and the cigarette at the same time in the pocket, you'd have this on top and this on the bottom. So when the hand comes in, you'd steal the dummy cigarette right off of the bobby pin, because it's held into place because of the hook eye, and then the hand comes up. In other words, the hand comes down into the pocket, palms the dummy cigarette, and then comes up holding the ball in the fingertips. And I've tested it out, and this works great. And I am certain that this is what Roy Benson was using this for. So I'm going to bobby pin up and attach the cigarette on the upper side of my pocket. 2 1/8 inch billiard ball goes down here. On the prop case, on the table stand for a gag, Roy Benson has a book that's supposedly a magic book. In his right pocket, he has the cigarette lighter, and then he has the banana, which we'll explain in a minute, which he has zippered open, and it's placed onto the right side here like this. Inside his jacket pocket. Let me get that correct. There we go, inside the jacket pocket. And coming up next, we're going to show you, explain to you how the whole routine works from beginning to end, and the little footnotes in between. And now this is how Roy Benson began his routine. Now, he would do that little joke where he would say, and I would like to do some billiard ball manipulation, but permit me first to produce a new kind of cigarette. It's called Doctor's Blend. In Egypt, more camels smoke Doctors than any other cigarette. Now, to a lot of people today, this doesn't make sense, but in the 1950s, this was a big joke, because I think in the 1940s and 50s, There used to be a very popular commercial or ad, print ad in the newspapers for the Camel cigarette brand, Camel brand cigarettes, and it said, amongst doctors that smoke, more doctors who smoke Camels than any other brand. So he was a switch on that joke. Today it wouldn't make sense, but back then it got a big laugh from the audience. So he'd say, allow me to produce a new kind of cigarette, doctor's blend. In Egypt, more Camel smoked doctors than any other cigarette. And with that laugh, Roy Benson would pick up his table, because he used it earlier for his Chinese sticks routine, and push it back. And in pushing it back, he would steal the cigarette. Now, this is what you got to remember. Roy Benson followed what I call the fundamental rules of stage magic. I mean, rule number one is when making a steal, the visible movement should have a natural motivation. Okay, that's one of my rules. So in this case, the table's in his way, he's going to move it back. And that natural motivation gives him an excuse to get his hand, his left hand, to the front left edge of that table to steal that cigarette. So that's what Roy Benson does. The little thing, tells the joke, and he puts his hand in. Now here's a problem. There is a problem here. For Roy Benson to slide that panel open, the audience is going to see his fingertips move. Okay, they're going to see his fingertips move. So how do you cover that? Well, fundamental rule of stage magic number 2 says the big movement masks the smaller secret movement. So in this case, when Roy Benson puts his fingers here, that little movement of the fingers moving is obscured by the fact that he's doing this big movement of moving the table over, which goes in the back. And now Roy Benson has that cigarette in his hand. And now that he's got that cigarette in the hand, he has to do something, because we're going to explain next. I'm going to explain to you fundamental rule of stage magic number 3, which is when palming an object on stage, there is just a tiny window of a few seconds in which you must either produce the object or add another visible object at the fingers of the hand. And now to clarify my rule number 3, okay, which is when palming an object on stage, there's a window of a few seconds in which you must either reproduce the object or place a visible object in the hand. This is a very old rule in magic, and it really goes back to what I call wand theory. Hundreds of years ago, magicians used the magic wand. And the real reason for the existence of the magic wand was for this reason, which is this. Let's say I'm going to do a vanishing coin. Say I do a false transfer of the coin. So I place the coin in there, and I say, look, it's gone. Well, after a few seconds, the audience will say, look, it's not in that hand, it's in the other hand, and they'd be correct. They would be correct. But by adding a magic wand, I can do a false transfer with the coin, hold the wand in the hand, and then wave over it and show it's vanished, and the audience somehow has a tough time believing that I'm palming an object, in this case a coin, and holding a wand at the same time. So if you vanish something in one hand, you really should soon thereafter place another object in the hand or have another object in the hand, and that keeps the audience from realizing that you have a palmed object there. In fact, with this palmed coin, you could hold a wand. If you had a wand or even held a microphone, if you're talking to a microphone, you got a palmed object, you can hold that object in your hand all day long and not worry about it. But if you're just palming an object in your hand and you don't want people to see that object, there's a heat on your hand unless you put an object there. So we're going to go back to Roy Benson's routine with the flash paper, and we'll continue from there. And now let's get back to the cigarette production that Roy Benson performed. Now, the production that he did was essentially what's known as a pantomime cigarette production. It dates back to vaudeville. There was a comedy performer, I don't know the person's name, but there was a comedy performer who apparently did a pantomime routine creating an invisible cigarette, and the cigarette became real, and then he slit the cigarette. And magicians copied that idea and continued on with that. Now, what Roy Benson added to this effect, as far as I can tell, is the idea of using flash paper. I've not been able to find anywhere any record of any magician before Roy Benson doing it with flash paper and making it really a grand effect. So Roy Benson steals, going back to it, steals the cigarette from underneath the edge of the table, and then picks up the piece of flash paper. And then he places the flash paper in his hand. So he's got palmed in this hand the cigarette, held in his fingertips like so. And he places the flash paper here. The reason for the flash paper is that previous rule I explained. This is the magic wand. This is the palmed object. Once you put that there, it takes all the heat off the fact that he's got a cigarette in his hand. Next, Roy Benson does the pantomime bit where he's going to add some tobacco. He makes believe it's a bad piece of tobacco. He tosses it away, puts some more. Then he reaches in his pocket and pulls out the cigarette lighter. By the way, this jacket is different from before, so this one, the pockets are sealed. So forgive me. He reaches in his pocket, pulls out his lighter, And then he lights the flash paper and then pops the cigarette into view and then lights the cigarette. So I'm not going to light the cigarette because I'm not a smoker. So but we'll show you the production. So he lights the cigarette, and when he lights the flash paper, when the flash paper gets to about here, he flicks the cigarette into view, and then lights the cigarette, puts out the lighter, and puts the lighter back in his pocket and takes his bow. And that's the first phase of Roy Benson's billiard ball and cigarette routine. Now, as we continue with the cigarette portion of Roy Benson's routine, I just want to also mention a little funny anecdote. While I was working on this video, I actually needed cigarettes. I preferred a menthol cigarette without a brown filter, and I bought these Cool cigarettes, and they had a brown filter, so I basically wasted $5 on cigarettes. And you know, I couldn't think. I wanted a menthol cigarette which was all white. And I knew my pal Paul Kozak is a smoker, so I sent him a message and I said, Paul, do you know of any cigarettes that are menthol that are all white? And ironically, he said that the only brand that he knew of that was all white and menthol was Benson and Hedges. So ironically, here we got Benson and Hedges cigarettes for the Benson routine. So anyway, so Benson lights this thing, the flash paper, pops this into view. So and by popping it into view, Roy basically let the flash paper go and just flicked it, just levered it up, and then held the cigarette to his mouth. So he lights a cigarette, which I'm not going to do. And now he's got the cigarette. Now he gets into the gag with the banana. Reaches into his coat, pulls out the banana. Now, to show you what a bright magician Roy Benson was and what a brilliant guy he was, he actually fooled me with the old banana trick. Now, this is an old clown gag. I mean, what you do is you go to any magic joke shop, you can find this. They have these little, like a plasticky or canvasy sort of banana peel with two zippers. And what you do is you get a real banana, you take the cover off the banana, you put the slimy little banana inside here. And then typically, how the joke is performed is the clown pulls out the banana, unzips it, peels it down, eats the banana, and then zips it closed and puts it back in the costume. The problem with this is that the banana totally wrecks the inside of your costume. A slimy little banana is horrible for your costume, and you get this high slimy little problem. That's why, by the way, they make them out of like a slick material, you know, so you can wash them. Well, I watched Roy Benson do it, and I thought to myself, you know, that's really horrible, having a banana in your costume. That must have just done terrible damage to your costume. And I was talking to Doug Edwards, who had owned at one time Roy Benson's props. And Doug told me that the banana wasn't real. He said it was balsa wood. So I went back and looked at the films of Benson, and Roy Benson fooled me because all it is, this is just a piece of balsa wood, which you get from a hobby shop. So I got a piece of balsa wood, and with a Dremel tool, I shaved it down, and I cut out a little bite mark so you can haul it this way. So it looks like you bit the banana, and you place it in here. And now you have a banana gag in which you never have to worry about it being dirty, filthy, or anything. It's perfect. It's ingenious. But there's one more aspect to this that you have to keep in mind. When Roy Benson did it, he completely understood the joke, because after I saw Roy Benson do this, I realized that every other person that I've seen do this gag does it completely wrong. See, when you tell a joke, what you want is you want the punchline, the comedy to come at the end. The punchline comes at the end, and there's nothing superfluous afterwards. So when a clown pulls a banana out, unzips it, the joke is over. The audience gets it. It's zippered. So now when you're doing all of this, it means nothing. What Roy Benson did that was very clever and original is that he had it already unzipped halfway. He had this in his pocket. He pulls it out. He's got the cigarette in his hand. He peels it down, and as far as the audience is concerned, he hasn't shown the zipper yet. They think this is a real banana. Then he'll swipe some banana juice, and he'll slick up his hair, and he did his eyebrows, and he'll seemingly eat it, turn it this way. Now he zips it up, and it gets the laugh. And then he takes this and puts it in his inside coat pocket and gets rid of it. And you know, it's crazy, but Roy Benson fooled me with the banana gag. So he's, you know, that I didn't realize it was a fake banana. I watched that tape, you know, dozens of times, and I didn't catch that it was a fake banana. The banana was actually balsa wood. So coming up next, we're going to start with Roy Benson's cigarette routine directly into the billiard balls. Now that Roy Benson has lit the cigarette, gotten rid of the banana, done the banana gag, he goes over to his case and to the little box there and pick up the little bag holding the billiard balls. And remember, in that bag holding the billiard balls, secretly there's a dummy cigarette sitting on top. And this follows a fundamental rule of stage magic number 4, which is the most deceptive way to steal and palm an object is to do so under the guise of picking up a visible object at the fingertips. So in this case, instead of having to do some sort of body steal, Roy Benson basically just reaches in here and he picks up this case, and when he turns his hand over, in the palm of his hand, he has the dummy cigarette, the second cigarette. So it's perfect. I mean, you just reach in, you toss this over to the other hand, and now you have this extra cigarette in here. So this is we'll go back a step. He's got the cigarette is lit, shows his hand, reaches in, tosses this here. By tossing it there, the dummy cigarette is in the hand, and then he does a classic cigarette move, which is very old. It's been around forever. You can find it in Greater Magic by Hilliard, amongst other books. You have a lit cigarette here, a real lit cigarette, and then you have a dummy cigarette held here. And what you do is you do a thumb palm with the cigarette, the lit cigarette. So you're doing a thumb palm so that the burning end of the cigarette is not at the crook of your thumb. The other end is burning. At the same time, you toss the dummy cigarette that's in your fingertips, at the bottom of your hand, into the air. So it looks like this. You have a lit cigarette. This is the performer's view. When the hand comes up, you do a thumb palm with this and toss the other cigarette, the dummy cigarette, away. So it switches a real cigarette for a fake cigarette, which is not burning and just falls to the floor. So I'll do it for you in tempo. You go like this. He looks down. You can even stamp it out. And now you get a real cigarette still palmed. He reproduces the cigarette. Now we're going to, in a moment, continue on with the billiard ball magic. Now with the dummy cigarette thrown to the floor and the cigarette reproduced, so the audience sees a cigarette tossed away and magically another cigarette appears, Roy Benson begins his billiard ball routine. Please note that in this routine, Roy Benson has no real body loads with the billiard balls. I mean, he has a billiard ball in this pocket and 2 in this pocket, but he doesn't have any clips in his costume or no downs holders or anything. Now, the reason for this is that, see, Roy Benson did billiard ball manipulation the old-fashioned way for many years. When he was a young man, he had billiard clips and he was practicing all that stuff. And then in the 1940s, he was working in Cuba, back, of course, before the communist era. Cuba was a big time, had casinos and nightclubs, and he was on stage performing his billiard ball routine, and there was a Cuban band behind him, and there was a drummer, and the drummer did not speak English. And when Roy Benson found is that when he did a trick with the billiard ball, some accent with it, he wanted the guy to give an accent. So, boom, the guy would hit, the guy would hit the drum or the tom or the cymbals when things would happen. Now, every night as he's performing, the Cuban musicians behind him would see Roy Benson grabbing the billiard balls from under his coat. In other words, after a few shows, they figured it out, and the drummer began to do accents, not to the productions, but to the steals that Roy was doing that the audience wasn't supposed to see. And Roy was trying to, tried to communicate with the guy to stop it, but the guy kept doing it. So then Roy thought, maybe I should come up with a ball routine which didn't have all of these clips and holders in the back. And that's when he trimmed his routine down to the routine that you're seeing now. So, getting back to the matter at hand. Roy Benson's tosses in a dummy cigarette away, reproduces a cigarette, reaches in the bag, pulls out the 2 balls in the shell. Now, forgive me, I'm going to put the cigarette down for just a second because it's hard to speak with it. He would click the 2 balls in the shell, and he'd move this hand this way, and then suddenly notice that another ball appeared. Then he'd hold his hand like this, and this is the Roy Benson's vanish, he would take his hand like this, and then make a ball disappear. So in other words, he would show his hand like this, go like that, and the ball would disappear. Ball goes back in the shell, the ball's in the fingertips, and he pull his hand away and act as if the ball has disappeared. So, go back a step, we're going to start from the top. Click the 2 balls, become 3 balls, suddenly notice 3, be startled. Come here, put this hand over here, put the ball back in the shell, and show the ball has vanished. Then he'd be startled, like, where did the ball go? And then as a gag, he'd reach onto the top of his table, and he had a little book, and he'd open it up like it's a magic book, and he's trying to read to find out where the ball went. He's like, oh, It went into my pocket is what his subtext is. So he's got a cigarette still in his mouth. He reaches in his right trouser pocket and he gets the white ball out. The white ball, by the way, is a slightly smaller ball, and he steals the second dummy cigarette. So while the hand is on the top of the pocket, you grab the dummy cigarette, pull it out of the holder. So now it's in this dummy cigarette's in this position, the fingers, and then you pull the billiard ball out of the fingertips like this. So now, in that one motion, remember the easiest way to pick up and steal palm an object is to do so in the guise of picking a visible object in the fingertips. Rule number 4, when he reaches in his pocket, pulls out this ball, the audience is expecting one object. He's very canny. He tosses it for a second, places it here, and now he's got the second dummy cigarette here. Now he tosses it, does the switch again for the dummy cigarette, stamps it out, reproduces his cigarette. So it's lovely in this routine because he's got cigarettes happening and billiards happening at the same time. Billiard ball goes back in his mouth, and then let me just get rid of it now for a second, just so I can make it easier to talk. He puts the billiard balls in his fingertips. Now, Roy Benson did not want to have all the billiard balls to be 2 1/4 inch because, well, I'll explain later why, but what happened was he figured out also that because of the law of optics, perspective, if you hold the billiard balls like this, these balls they get small in the back, it's harder to tell that the balls are not all the same size. See, if I put a smaller ball here, it becomes more obvious that there's a size difference. But if you put it back here, because this ball is in the background, it looks like it's just getting smaller in the background. So he puts the balls in his hands, drops this ball a second, puts this ball back here. Now remember, he had a cigarette in his mouth. So that cigarette acts as a magic wand. So you can hold it in your hand. No one expects there to be a ball hidden there. Well, let me explain that again, by the way. Drops the ball from here, puts the hand up, steals the ball from behind the shell, is what I meant to say. Does this and steals the ball, got the cigarette. I'll do it for you in tempo. Got the balls, blows some smoke, reproduces this ball. So Benson produces a ball. Now he does a vanish with the ball, places the hands like this. So he takes the smaller ball between his index and middle finger, shows his hand this way, sometimes clicked it, and then brings his hands over and puts the ball back into the shell and puts the balls back in his hand as if the ball is hidden in his hand. We'll go to that move again. The ball is dropped from the shell, puff of smoke, reproduced. Balls are shown to the audience like this. When his hand comes around, he puts the ball back into the shell, the hands are placed back. And then now the audience thinks there's a ball here. Do it one more time. Ball is dropped here, blows some smoke, reproduces a ball. Shown this way, hand comes up on top, places the ball back. The ball is seemingly shown here. He'll turn this both sides for a second, and then look, the ball is gone, and go, it's in my pocket. Now he reaches in his pocket, and he palms the red ball and pulls the white ball up at the fingertips, like so. So, remember the easiest way to pick up and steal an object is to do so in the guise of picking up a visible object at the fingertips. In this case, they see just the white ball placed there. So you get 4 balls. He blows some smoke, produces the red ball. Now sometimes in nightclubs, Roy Benson, when he produced this, would be startled. He'd look in the book, he'd look up in the sky, as if this crazy extra ball appeared. Now we're going to get to what I call the master move, because this is really a beautiful piece of billiard ball magic. It's the way in which Roy Benson takes this ball, places it into the palm of his hand, and then produces the 6th ball. Let me go back and show you how this works. From the back view, Roy Benson produces this ball, steals this ball from the shell, places his the heel of his palm on the shell and rotates the shell around to reproduce this other ball. I'll do it a bunch of times from different angles so you can see this. Ball is produced. Left hand steals a ball from behind the shell. The left heel of the hand touches the shell so that the shell remains facing the audience in the convex side. Produces a ball. Do it one more time. In tempo. I blow some smoke, places the ball here, red ball appears, steals the ball from behind the shell, rotates the hand around, produces the 6th ball. Okay, so now we're going to get to a little explanation here. Roy Benson used different sized billiard balls. And I asked some people that, photographic evidence proved it, and anecdotally we knew that he used different sized billiard balls in the routine. Some were 2 1/4, some were 2 1/8. I knew which balls were which size, but we couldn't find out why. but I had several films of Roy Benson performing the billiard balls. So what I did was I compared the two, and I found out that the order in which he drops the balls from his hands never changes, and that gave me the answer, and I'll tell you why. He dumps the balls out in a specific order, so he's always left with the 2 1/8 billiard balls. And I tried to figure out what move, why would he retain the smaller billiard ball? I mean, if your finale of your routine is going to be with the one ball, wouldn't you want that to be the biggest ball for greatest visibility? Why would you retain the smaller ball? And I figured it out is because if you have wooden billiard balls, you can do all these other moves, but what's harder to do on the wooden billiard balls is the Alexander ball roll. If you use a bigger ball, it's harder to do the Alexander ball roll. But I'm using silicone balls. These are all Fakini balls. With Fakini, believe it or not, the bigger ball, it makes it easier to use. So if I was doing this routine, I'd use all the same, all 2 1/4. But okay, so Roy Benson takes these balls out, click, click.